Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms Monsters Radio. And thanks for joining me. And I want to welcome all new members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, I am going to start off with an account that was actually recently forwarded to me. The Witness states, "Hi, Lon. I just listened to your alien threat video on your YouTube channel. You asked for personal encounters. Well, this one is my dad's story. Now, he was camping with three of his buddies in Colorado around 1977. They hiked up steep mountain inclines all day through rocky valleys and across alpine fields. Now, by sunset, they passed a field of sheep, thousands of them, and decided that they would make camp on the other side of this field to get a great view of the stars. That night, they made camp at 12,000 feet at Rollins Pass and built a fire. My dad and his friends were sitting around it, taking turns drinking beer, telling ghost stories and the like, when suddenly the sky lit up above them. My dad squints up, shields his eyes, and sees what appears to be a massive fireball headed in their direction. He and his buddies scream and scramble to their feet as the fireball hits the opposite ridge with a loud, resounding boom. A shockwave rocks the canyon and knocks one of my dad's friends off his feet. Obviously, my dad and his friends were extremely scared. It's as if one of their ghost stories had just come true. His friend Walter wants to go and check it out, but the other guys are too freaked out to get up in the pitch black night to investigate. My dad convinces them to wait till morning. Now, needless to say, no one slept that night, or at least very long. The next day, they packed up their camp and hiked to the other side of the ridge just beyond Rollins Pass. Now, Walter was the bravest of my dad's friends and decided to lead the way. As he passed over the rocky ridge to the other side, where the fireball had hit, he gasped and turned as pale as a ghost. My father jogged to catch up with him and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the field that lay beyond. All the sheep, or what was left of them, lay scattered across the field. There was no blood, just thousands of sheepskins, a few heads and bones, as far as the eye could see, scattered across this field. Not a mark on the ground, no charred grass, nothing, just dead sheep. My dad swore it was the creepiest thing he'd ever seen. His friends and he debated on the hike down what exactly killed those sheep. Aliens? UFO? Who knows? Now, look, I searched for information concerning this account, and I found nothing. And I did put a call out for information, so pretty weird. But anyway, but that's not the only strange tale I have this evening. So let's get started, and we'll listen and talk about these strange accounts together.
Of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
So before I go any further, I just want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box And the Buy Me a Coffee link is also shown below. Thanks for your consideration. Now, your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. Again, I want to thank my chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, for their commitment to me and the channel. Now, if you're in the chat and have questions, please use all caps. I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. So this next account, a group of friends are on a backpacking trip to Saleski State Forest in Appalachia, Ohio. That night, the witness heard loud human-like breathing and heavy footsteps outside the tent. Now, they tell me, I need validation that I'm not insane. I've never really had paranormal experiences, but I cannot explain this. I'm in college, and I and some other 7 people from my school went on a backpacking trip, and we had experienced leaders with us. We drove to Saleski State Forest, which is an Appalachian region of Ohio. It was early April, and it was cold, and everything was still dead from winter. After hiking miles into the forest, we set up camp at a backpacking campsite, and there were a couple other groups of people as well. A few of them were friendly older couples and 2 college-age girls. Everyone was pretty spread out from each other, so we set up camp further away from everyone else. Now, I've always been able to sense the energy of places, and the energy in this area wasn't that great. It was almost spooky. Each of us had individual one-person tents, and we formed the kind of cluster in this site, with my tent being in the back so no one was behind me. Our cluster was also right next to the forest because this backpacking site was like a big cleared-off square in the middle of the trees. Fast forward, I'm dead asleep around 2 a.m., and I wake up to leaves crunching right behind my tent. I heard footsteps walking in circles around my tent. They had a sort of heaviness to them, and they couldn't be a deer or a dog. Also, it sounded like 2 legs. I couldn't make this up. This creature was circling my tent for long periods, slowly creeping up the sides of my tent and just stopping for periods, and then would move on to walk around the rest of our tent cluster. I could hear human-like breathing from the mouth when it was close to my tent, like a sort of heaving. I was shaking, too scared to unzip my tent and investigate. I kid you not, this occurred for hours, and it seemed I was the only one awake. So out of nowhere, I saw an illuminated light shape from my tent, although I couldn't tell what it was from inside my tent because it was all zipped up. It was like a warm glow. I might have assumed it was someone's flashlight, except no one was moving. I was paralyzed in fear. I simply couldn't believe it was an animal. At some point, I fell asleep due to the sheer exhaustion, but I could hear heavy footsteps circling until I did. Now, in the morning, I questioned a few fellow campers about it, and my leader admitted she heard the footsteps and noises as well, admitting it was bizarre, and she would have investigated if she had not been so groggy. Now, one of the boys in the group said he also noticed a light that came on, but thought it was someone else. Not a single person in this group woke up to go out or turn on a light that night. I've heard things about the Appalachian region being creepy and bizarre, and now I do believe it. So a group of mule deer hunters are near Cody, Wyoming, when they realize that something's been in their campsite. They later observe a curious Bigfoot watching them. Now, he states, this took place in 1999. 3 of my friends were out hunting near Cody, Wyoming. Me and my friends were more than traditionalists. We tried to preserve the style of hunting back in the mountain man style. So we had done a lot of research into clothing and weapons use, all that. Well, we were up in Cody, Wyoming at a friend's ranch, up there mule deer hunting in the old traditional style. Well, we were up there and we shot a mule deer. We'd been there about 2 weeks. We had pack horses and we were cutting this mule deer up to put on the pack horses. And then suddenly there was what I thought at the time was an animal coming near us. It kind of growled and snarled, kind of baring its teeth. I told my friend, let's go with what we got on the horse and leave the rest. So we went back to our base camp. Later that night, I heard rustling in the leaves. I told my friends, well, the bears are trying to get to the meat. Let's reposition it. And we do. We didn't really notice anything, though. We got up the next morning and I said, did you notice anything odd about that animal yesterday? And they just kind of said that they really hadn't seen anything like that, but they're not from that area of the country, so they figured it was something native to the area. So we went out again scouting for more mule deer. I later come back. A friend and I came back early. I heard some rustling again, and I said, bears are after meat again, so let's go up real quiet and see if we can catch it and scare it off. So we sneaked up to it, and there's this, it looked like a guy in, I don't know, like the old pictures of the Indians or the mountain men with the big buffalo capes around them. Kind of looked like that. But it wasn't quite like it. I mean, the hair was long. I was like, what in the world is this? So we sat there and watched it. I now know it was a Bigfoot, but at the time it didn't register, you know. We're watching it going through our packs and stuff like that. Our packs are the old basket style packs, you know, the basket frame, wood, and metal. Let me tell you, they're killer on the shoulders. Anyway, we were just really intrigued. I don't know if it was he or she, but it was intrigued. I finally said, I don't like this. Let's real nonchalantly walk up and see if we can spook it away. So we just started walking like normal. Sure enough, it runs away and we're a little spooked. So later that day, we're eating lunch and we noticed the same thing is camped across the creek that we're camped at. I said, boys, look at that. And we sat there and watched it. And it watched us. And it was probably, and it seemed like ever, but probably like 30 minutes. I said, I wonder what it is. And it acts too much human to be an animal. And we started pondering and talking about it. One guy mentioned a Bigfoot, and we all kind of laughed at it. Then it was the oddest thing. On the last day, we were packing up our meat, and this thing was across the creek again, watching us pack up. I said, I wonder if that's someone that's just been left out here, you know, a hermit type. So I laid a hindquarter of one of the deer out at the center of the camp, and I said, let's go. We acted like we were going. I said, now let's double back and see. The Bigfoot had come across the creek and was eating a little bit of the leg of the deer. Then it took it and walked back across the creek and down over the ridge. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. So this next account, two friends who were camping at Moshannon State Forest here in Pennsylvania heard a woman singing near their campsite. They go to see if she's okay, but they can't find her. Then the story gets a little strange. So the witness states, hi, Lon, fellow Pennsylvanian here. I thought I'd send my encounter report to you. Back in the summer of 2018, I went camping in Moshannon State Forest with a friend. We had a fire going and we were just chatting and messing with the fire when I heard a very faint sound that distracted me from the conversation. I told my friend to hush up for a second and we both listened closely. We could hear a woman singing in the distance that sounded like an old medieval melody. We couldn't make it out what it was because she was singing in another language. We were far and away from any other campsite, as we like to camp in our own spots away from everything else that could potentially have other people. It really creeped us out, though. But what made it freaky was that I ended up posting pictures of our camp on Facebook. And another person recognized the location and asked if I had heard anything weird. I said, "Why do you ask?" He went on to explain how he and his friends were near that campsite on a different night with one of their dogs, and they heard a woman crying as she was coming down the road that passes by the site. They decided to check on her to see if she was all right, but when they got to the road and called out to her, there was no response, and the crying immediately stopped. They thought it was strange, but decided to head back to camp. When they got back, they found their dog convulsing by the fire and foaming at the mouth. They grabbed him, got in their car, and started hightailing to the vet. He said the dog went limp in his arms on the way and he thought it had died. But once they reached the highway outside of the forest, the dog woke up immediately and acted like nothing happened. They assumed there was something evil in the area. And when he was telling me the story, I turned white as a ghost. And once he finished, I explained what my other friend and I heard near our camp. It really freaked me out because the guy with the dog ended up going with me later and showed me where everything went down, which happened to be exactly where I was hearing the singing the night I went camping. So next account, two friends are on a road trip and stop at Mount Hood, Oregon to camp. Now, during the night, the witness hears mimicking of her and her friend's voice from a previous conversation. So the witness states, "I was about 26 years old when this event happened, about 9 years ago. A friend and I decided to go on a 2-week road trip from Kansas, Colorado, and Utah all the way west to the West Coast. We camped the whole way and had an incredible time other than occasionally having trouble finding campsites. One day, after a fun, gluttonous night in Portland, we decided to camp at Mount Hood. It was the middle of summer, so we expected to see other campers on the mountain, even though it was a weekday. We had to drive far up in search of a campsite because all of the ones towards the bottom were closed due to fallen trees or trees that would be falling if the strong breeze had come through. I don't know what it was about, but it was a beautiful mountain with natural spring water and clear rivers. We were excited to be there. Now, we saw a couple old men fishing on the way up and one family camping. They appeared to be Native American, and were about 5 of them. We drove up quite a ways before finding a nice private camp spot and setting up the camp for the night. We walked around, gathered wood, talked about the night in Portland, and set up the camp, set up the tents. The time comes for us to go to sleep, and my friend falls asleep. I'm still lying there trying to fall asleep when I hear footsteps and leaves crunching. This puts me on high alert since there weren't many people camping and none close to us. I lay there with my heart racing and listening. I begin to hear voices and I try to nudge my friend awake, but she's out and not waking. I continue to listen and I start to make out voices and words. It's our voices, having the exact conversation we were just having around the campfire even an hour before. It didn't last long before the silence returned. Needless to say, I had a very hard time sleeping that night. Now, I know you have all heard me talk about the mimicking phenomena. Many times it's associated with Bigfoot, even crawler humanoids, possibly spiritual entities. I guess it's just a matter of what you believe it was. Now, this next account, a woman and her friends were camping in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia when they heard terrifying screams that were like the noise of the Nazgul from the LOTR movies or the Lord of the Rings movies. Anyway, they state, this happened back in February 2023, and I just want to know what I heard. My boyfriend and I and a couple of friends decided to try winter camping and threw together a quick camping trip. Now, we got to the park late and ended up camping 2 miles into the park directly on the trail. Everyone else had fallen asleep quickly and I stayed up. I'm already wary of the woods and I didn't love that nobody put their food up. This is in the Appalachian mountains of West Virginia, and I wasn't crazy about waking up to a black bear looking for food. So anyway, at approximately midnight, I heard what sounded exactly like the Nazgul screams from the Lord of the Ring movies. It sounded like one scream and then others joined in until it was one very loud scream from many voices, but then it died off. It made the hair in the back of my neck stand up, and I immediately woke up my boyfriend and begged him to stay up with me all night. He thinks I heard coyotes, but I never in my life heard a coyote make a sound, and, he didn't hear the screaming. We weren't near any towns. It sounded like it was on the top of the mountains where all the woods and we were camped at the base. The only thing I think of is sirens, but I never heard sirens like that, and I don't see why there would be multiple, and it sounded like too animal-like. It also wasn't an elk. We don't have them in our area, and even if we did, it didn't sound like an elk audio recording. If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, there's a link to the screens. I'm open to natural explanations. I just don't know of any naturally occurring phenomena that makes those screeches. Well, honestly, it may have been a bobcat. The screens of the Nazgul in the film, and if you don't know what the Nazgul are, those are dark robe things that look like spirits riding on horses and made those screaming sounds in the movies. It kind of sounds like a bobcat, so maybe that's what they heard, but I don't know. Now, two brothers are hiking and camping at Salt Spring Island, British Columbia. They hitch a ride and soon see an unknown creature that has no explanation cross the road in front of them. Now, they state, this is the first time I'm sharing this outside of my family. It was the fall of 1996 at Salt Spring Island, British Columbia, Canada. I went on a camping trip with my twin brother to Ruckle Park on the south side of the island. I think that's the direction. We caught a ferry to Fort Harbor early in the evening. We set off for an approximately 8-kilometer hike through the county roads to the camping ground before it got dark. We both headed off with our backpacks. After about 40 minutes of walking through along the country road, the light was starting to fade and the darkness was coming. We started to hurry along, talking and planning our route. Now, my brother suggested we maybe hitchhike if a car passes. I thought it was a good idea since by that time it was getting dark. And by the time we saw the first car coming, we were about 4 to 5 kilometers out. So finally, a car pulled over and it was now dark. I was a little surprised with a young lady with a small child, and she said, "Hop in and I'll give you guys a ride to the park entrance." I introduced us both and we got in the car. My brother got in the back seat and I jumped in the front seat beside the driver. We headed off down the road. After just a few minutes in the headlights, we saw this creature on the side of the road. Now, the young lady slowed the car down and we all stared out the front window in amazement. Slowly walking across the road was this creature. It's about the size of a bear. It kind of looked like that, but also a wolf. It had long black hair. I could see patches of skin and muscle. It didn't look well. Short snout nose, a cross between a bear and a wolf. It looked toward the car. Its eyes reflected a little and its muscles moved in the light. Slowly it walked across the road on all 4 legs. The back legs looked dog-like and strong. The front legs were strong, and the body was skinny but strong. The black hair was bald in places. If I had to describe the creature, I'd say it looked like a werewolf. I know it sounds crazy, maybe the emaciated bear. It was horrifying. As it crossed the road, it looked up and leaped across the ditch and up onto the embankment. I didn't notice any tail, just a strong back and hind leg. Then it was gone. We all just said, "What the heck was that? Deer? Dog? Bear?" No, it was a cross between a bear and a dog, or a wolf, maybe sick. It was very scary. All I know is that what I saw, and it's something I'll never forget. Now, after a few nights of camping, we walked past the area where we saw the creature. The ditch in the back were about 10 foot to the bottom of the wire fence. That creature must have jumped that fence also probably about 14 foot. I don't think bears can jump like that. So this account, a Michigan dogman encounter story, convinces a man that the account is true and that these creatures do exist in the Upper Peninsula. Witness states, I was told about this incident many years ago. A group of 4 men in Michigan's Upper Peninsula were going camping and fishing at night. They were avid outdoorsmen, big and buff guys who matched the lumberjack aesthetic. They live outdoors in the boonies and always have. Their families stayed behind at camp that night while the men took their john boat out to catch the next day's meal. They get far from the families when they decide to pull off on a shoreline. It's pitch dark outside while they're setting up their chairs and lights. As they are setting up, they start hearing something pacing the tree line behind them. They shine their lights and catch red eye shine watching them. They're a little weary of this, but continue setting up. They had just seen just about every predator out there. They're alert, but they aren't scared. They continue getting their gear ready when they start to hear growling from the other side of the tree line. They shine their lights, and there's a second pair of red eyes. Now, they're unsettled and begin to pack their stuff up. One of them stays up as the watch and keeps their lights between the 2 animals in the woods. By this point, both the animals are growling and making huffing noises. They're almost done packing the gear they have when a massive rock flies over the head into the water. Now they're really put off and start throwing things into the boat. They have about half of the stuff in the boat when one man screams and points to the tree line. They describe the creature as being inhumanly tall, covered in hair, very muscular and just broad and big, and having a face more like a wolf. The creature is now screaming at them as it's slowly advancing toward him. The men are horrified and ditch their remaining gear. Now, when they manage to get the boat out of the water, they all shine their lights back to the shore and can see the rough shape of now 2 creatures, both the same in shape and height. The men who are telling this story are literally sobbing and struggling to get their words out. They get back to their families at camp and immediately order everyone to start packing up. They don't tell their families why, but they can obviously tell something is seriously wrong. Now, this is obviously a Michigan dogman story. These men were so scared of something out there that they went as far as to move to the suburbs of the city. They were so scared their own homes didn't feel safe anymore, and they never went camping again. The fact that these families were raised outdoors and these men spent 99% of their lives out there living off fish they caught or animals they hunted made it very believable to me. They were crying and shaking while telling this story. Now, I'm not at all saying men can't cry, but big macho lumberjack-looking men all crying in front of each other and barely being able to get the story out was enough for me to believe them. I don't know what they saw, but I believe they definitely encountered something. So this next account, a group of high school classmates camping at Mount Lassen National Park. When one of the groups takes off on their own at night, the eyewitness goes looking for them. He found something else instead. The witness states this occurred at Mount Lassen National Park in Northern California in 1973. I was camping out with 6 other boys. We were up there spending the night on the volcano at Mount Lassen. It was getting dark, and one of the boys that was in our group said, "Hey, I'm going to walk around." Now, I didn't know the other 5 boys well. We were friends from high school. I said, "That's not a good idea. You don't want to go walking out there because there's lots of timber and it's pitch black. You could literally fall off a cliff and die." Anyway, this kid takes off. We got a fire going. It just started to get dark. I tell the other guys, somebody's got to go out and get him, bring him back. He may get hurt. And no one did anything. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for someone to get up and go after this kid. No one did so. And I said, well, I'm going out and try to get him back. So I take off on this trail and I'm walking along. I'm yelling the guy's name, no response, no nothing. Then suddenly I heard the scream. The scream of a huge animal, and it was like nothing I've ever heard before. It wasn't just one yell. It was kind of hard to put into words. What was strange was this animal, I could see it. There was a small gully, and it was standing on the other side of the gully, and this screech, it was guttural, and it was huge. You could tell it was a huge animal by how low and deep it was. The strange thing was that it sounded like it was literally right next to my ear. It was bizarre. Anyhow, this thing screamed. It yelled. It's hard to put it into words, so I looked directly across the gully, and I could see it again. Again, it was low light, but I could see the animal. I didn't know what it was. At that time, I had never even heard of a Bigfoot. So this animal is standing, and it's humanoid. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, dark fur, and screaming. And it was close to me. It was probably only around 50 yards away. There was a deep gully between us. Anyway, the scream comes out, and I'm frozen in my tracks, scared. Well, the kid that I'm looking for comes running past me, and he's running back to the campfire, and he doesn't say a word to me. He just went straight past. So I start running. I'm running back now. I'm scared. Well, what happened was there was the other kid who took off to help me following up behind me. I ran into him on the trail. I yelled at him. I slowed down. I told him to run, just run. And I kept running. He goes, yeah, right. You guys are playing games or whatever. Basically, we all 3 made it back, and we sat around the campfire the rest of the night, frightened and scared. Well, I thought it was like a man in a suit, maybe. But the next morning, I said, we got to get a hold of the rangers, the Mount Lassen Park Rangers. And we did. It was one of the older people in the group. I was the one of the older people in the group. And I said to the ranger, hey, someone was out there. He could have killed us. We could have had somebody get killed. I described what it looked like in the scream. The ranger got a serious look in his face, got up from his desk, walked closer to me, whispered in my ear, young man, it was a Bigfoot. That was the last time I ever went camping. Now, I will say that Mount Lassen has had more Bigfoot sightings over the years than any other place in California, quite frankly. You hear a lot of the sightings in different parts of the state, but Mount Lassen, I think I've gotten more accounts from that place than I have any place else. Now, this was 1973, and of course, that was before the whole Bigfoot thing started catching on, and you heard the word Bigfoot, you wouldn't even know what you were dealing with. So, yeah. So, folks, you got questions, put them up there. I want to thank Lala Bright for her super sticker, and Moondogs for his $5 super sticker as well. Thanks, both of you. Let's see what we got. Yeah, Mike's been saying if he had been at 10, he had walked out with his gun. I have a 4,000 acre forest behind my house, and I'm just waiting to see Bigfoot or Dogman in my backyard. Well, you see him, let me know. He also said, it's been here 5 years, and I've yet to see one or the other. My radio room, where I spend a lot of my time, faces the forest, so I have a good vantage point. I am a night person. I don't know where you live at. I think you live in California, Mike. I don't know, but you may one day. Never thought I'd see one. Oh, he's in Kelso, Washington. Well, that's, you may one day. Oh yeah, that's funny. I was talking about Lords of the Ring, and then the Nazgul scream, I think, was a horse. Peter Jackson's wife Fran screaming. Shorter Cook actually worked on the movie with Peter Jackson, so she knows all about that. I had forgotten all about that. That's interesting. Dust Bunny. Are there areas in the country where these things happen more than others? Well, of course, here in the East, the Appalachian Mountains are, you're always going to get a story out of the Appalachian Mountain, especially along the trail. But the whole Appalachian, which is huge, I mean, it runs from Maine to Georgia, but there are areas where there are many more sightings. I'd say from Pennsylvania down south into North Carolina, probably the most active areas. But I get a lot of reports out of Pennsylvania, of course, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina. So yeah, I'd say that'd be the area. Out west, well, of course, the Sierras. A lot of sightings in the Sierras. Mortal Clown, thank you for your donation. Much appreciated. And Robo1776 ask, thanks for your donation. Any reports of encrypted going near tents besides Bigfoot and Dogman, I guess? Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different reports. I mean, I've got a bunch of stuff. Camping reports. I'll probably do some more. I've done some previously, but I probably get more camping reports and hiking reports than anything else. I see Cryptid Cryptids is in tonight. I appreciate it coming on. Any other questions, folks? If I missed it, retype it, and I'll hang on here a bit if you have anything else to ask. Can's Quatch asks, are there any creepy human encounters while camping? I have a few. Yeah, I do have a few. Actually, I got a few up here in Pennsylvania, quite frankly. It happens. There's a lot of weird people out there. Any other questions, folks? Marla said creepy humans in Pennsylvania. Well, you and I both live in Pennsylvania, so we know. And Thomas as well, so. Robo 1776. Any reports of people being effects in their tents beside being square energy weapon effects? I can't think of any offhand. I'd have to dig that up. Thomas Carroll, do you get many reports from the backwoods of Russia? Occasionally I get some. Most of the reports I get out of Russia come from other investigators who do send them to me, but I do get some really weird ones occasionally. Of course, I've talked about some of the cases I've had around the Black Sea, or cases or reports I've had around the Black Sea, especially in Ukraine. And I had a couple in Romania and around there. So, yeah, I have some. I can't really remember what they were, but I do know I have some. I do have one from Russia. There's a certain area. I think it's around the Urals where people go missing as well. I had to dig that one up. Can Squatch, do campers feel like they are being run out of Bigfoot territory, just being messed with? I think most people kind of do believe that they're being pushed out, but I think I think Bigfoot for the most part are very territorial, and especially when you're going out in a wilderness area where there's not a whole lot of campers, you go in there. Many times they're going to react. So, as far as cryptid canines, probably not as much, because they very rarely seem to want to show themselves in any area. They're pretty stealthy about it. Supigato. Any new sightings in mid-Michigan? Yeah, I've had a few. I've sent one of the team to investigate a few of them in Michigan. He lives just north of Detroit. He's been looking at a few of them. Not really reports, but people saying of, things they hear and possible Bigfoot and cryptid canine reports. I could probably do a Michigan report and have plenty of material. There's just a lot of weird stuff that goes on in Michigan, let alone up in the peninsula, but in the upper peninsula, but all throughout Michigan. Cryptids. Are there ways to bring the cryptids to you when camping? Well, if you want to draw them, I would be honest with you. I would just act as normal as possible, because if you do anything out of the ordinary, it's probably going to be detrimental as opposed to just acting like yourself. Now, I mean, if you have some food you want to put out away from the campsite, they might show up. But they're not going to come to the camp unless, if there's a fire going for the most part. And if it's they're going to come at night, maybe, but they will try to keep themselves hidden. I would believe. Can Squatch. If the imitation of human voices is in Bigfoot, what do you think is responsible? I've heard a lot of crawler humanoids supposedly doing that, from reports. I mentioned a few of them in my book, the Meme Humanoid book, where people did hear some mimicking. But many times, from what I understand, it's actually Bigfoot doing it. George Penguin, did you know these types of accounts related to UFOs? Oh, you talking about it camping? Yeah, there are a few. Scattered. King Cobra abused. Have there been any reports in Eastern Pennsylvania that I know? Oh, I've got a lot of them in Eastern Pennsylvania. A lot of cryptid canine reports. Yep. And I've talked about those before as well. You might want to go back in my archive of on YouTube. But maybe I can put something together. I got to see if I got any more recent ones that I haven't talked about before. Yeah, Shore Cook says she thinks the alleys in the Blue Mountains keep to their own territory. I've had several people that I know have lived up in the Blue Mountains, and they kind of tell me the same thing. They seem to be very skittish. As opposed to the Bigfoot we have here in North America. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Can Squatch, any reports from camp host? Oh, I may have a few. You mean people that own campsites? Yeah, I think I've got a few. I know one guy who was Native American. He was actually Algonquin, I think. Probably Mohawk, up in the Genesee area, where he had a campsite up there that he owned, and his father ran it. They had a lot of Bigfoot. Yeah, folks, I tell you, the best thing to do, if you want to make suggestions for me to do shows, to dig up stuff, send me an email, Lon Strickler at phantomsmonsters.com, or send me a messenger message on Facebook. Jose Sanchez, from what you've studied, what areas in the U.S. are the most concentrated reported with cryptids in general? Well, overall, Pacific Northwest, more and more, it used to be just Bigfoot, but we're getting more and more cryptid canine reports, even some crawler humanoids. The upper Midwest in general, from Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin areas around Lake Michigan up into Superior. Texas, pretty active, and of course, Florida and around the Gulf are pretty active as well. We've been working on this case, and Shorter Cook's been involved with it. We've been working on this Central Alabama case has been going on for 4 or 5 years now, and I will eventually get into all that. I have made a few reports out of that, but we've got a lot of audio and a few videos and stuff that we've been looking at. I have sent them to Shorter Cook. She has looked at it. Her RV group has been working with me as well. I've worked with her for years on other cases. We've worked together. Yeah, it's, I will eventually put it out. I don't like to put anything up until I get to a better understanding of what we're dealing with as far as cases that are involved with our group. Of course, I was talking to folks about us doing I did this case with Arissa Miller of Yorktown Hotel in York, Pennsylvania. We did that last Wednesday before last. We still haven't got a report made out, but that was RV'd by Shorter Cook and her group too. So yeah, I'm keeping busy. Jose Sanchez, I'm in Florida. I only hear about the skunk ape, never crawlers or Mothman types. Oh, I've had some Mothman cases in Pasco County. From Tampa down south into, I don't know what county, further down into Pasco is that far south, even down into the Zephyr Hills area. I've had several reports down there. Yep. In fact, all that was the Mothman cases were going on about the same time we started looking into Chicago cases. And speaking of Chicago, though I can't say much, but I will tell you folks, July 31st on Netflix, on Unsolved Mysteries, Tobias Whalen and I will be featured in one of the episodes that's released. And that's about all I can say. So mark down July 31st. When it's released, there are going to be 5 episodes released by Unsolved Mysteries. And it's a case we've been working on. You probably know which case it is. So there you go. Okay. Well, anyway, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. And if you donate, it's very much appreciated. Your support's what makes this all possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the show or, for the blog, you can contact me at Lon Strickler at phantomsmonsters.com. And look, if you've got something that you want to report, or you've got, if you got a suggestion for a show, please send it to me. And I will very much appreciate it. So, folks, until next week, again, I want to thank you for coming on here. And I will talk to you then. Take care.